Good evening, everyone. I'm Congressman Mike Thompson. Thank you all very, very much for joining us this evening, tonight in Washington, D.C., this evening back in the district. We're going to get started shortly. We're just waiting to make sure that the live feed on Facebook is up and everybody has access. So while we wait, I've posted a poll that you have access to, and I would hope that you would take a moment to fill it out. And then after you've filled out your poll, if you could submit any questions that you have. We want to take the questions, want the questions submitted so we can make sure we don't have any duplicates, and it'll make things go a little smoother. So to ask a question, well, all you have to do is use the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. And you can also like a question. If you see one that someone else posts, you can like it, and that will give us an idea as to how many people are interested in that particular topic. So we'll try to get as many questions answered as we can tonight. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. So if your question isn't asked, if you email me at thompson.townhall@mail.house.gov, and we'll post that up, but thompson.townhall@mail.house.gov. We'll make sure that I answer your questions once we get them. So are we live? All right, we're live on Facebook, so we're going to go ahead and get started. For those who are streaming on Facebook, if you'd like to ask a question, please put it in the chat. And thank you all for making the time to be here tonight. I think this is going to be interesting, and we're going to have a little bit of fun. We're doing a Zoom because I'm in Washington, D.C. We have votes all week, including tomorrow, so I won't come home. Hopefully, I'll come home tomorrow. It all depends if we're able to get the funding bill to keep the government open out of the House tomorrow. And then the plan is for me to fly back tomorrow night, and I'll see some of you tomorrow and over the weekend and over next week. I'll continue to do town halls. We've got a pretty robust town hall schedule this year. I'll continue to do those in person. So this is a rare Zoom town hall, but as I said, I think it's going to be fun. Before we get started, there's just a couple things I want to say. We're in some pretty challenging times right now, and before we dive into the economy, which this Zoom is about, I just want to acknowledge that many of us are feeling rightfully concerned and disturbed right now because of the increase in political violence over the course of recent months. From the assassination of Minnesota Democratic State Legislator Melissa Hortman and the shooting of her colleague, John Hoffman, to the assassination of conservative activist Charlie Kirk in Utah, this political violence and hatred is just unacceptable. There is no place in this debate, no matter what the policy issues are, for this type of unacceptable adherent behavior. Our work to ensure our places of worship and our schools and our communities are safe from violence is more important now than ever. I want you to know that I will continue to use my voice to promote peace, civility, empathy, and kindness. And I would encourage everyone to consider doing the same. As onto the economy, as you know well, these are extremely challenging times as well. And the challenging times are made more difficult by the number of unforced errors and self-inflicted trade wars started by this administration. And there's no way around it. The on-again, off-again tariffs and congressional actions dealing with slashing services to pay for tax breaks for billionaires and large corporations, is really hurting working Americans, and it's hurting our small businesses. And nowhere is that more apparent than with this big, ugly law that was just passed to deal with everything from cutting my tax provisions that were put in place to increase the renewable energy supply that we have, to cutting $1 trillion out of healthcare, kicking 15 million people off of healthcare. It's bad. We're seeing that. Kayla will probably have something to say. The alarming credit scores are dropping at a pace faster than the Great Recession. People are struggling to make ends meet. The Yale Budget Lab estimates that tariffs are going to bump the cost to families by about $2,500 a year. And I understand why people are concerned, given the seemingly lack of affordability that we're all facing. So to talk about the economy, we have a very, very special guest, Kyla Scanlon, who I met in a Ways and Means briefing. She was just outstanding. And at the time, I was so impressed. I said, why don't we do something together? We'll do a town hall or something. She agreed. And this was the time we could do it. She's in California. I'm in Washington, D.C. So that's why we're doing the Zoom. Kyla is the founder of a financial education company called Host, and is the host of Let's Appreciate Business podcast. She's a well-known economic commentator online. She holds a degree in finance, economics, and data analysis. And I'm really excited that you're on, Kyla. Thank you very, very much for being here. And before we jump to the questions, Melissa, who's also in California, in my Sonoma office, my office in Santa Rosa, she'll be reading. She's going to read the results of the poll question that we asked.
Okay. It looks like 95 people participated in the poll, and about 27% voted a lot, 53% said somewhat, and 20% voted no. And again, the question was, are the tariffs impacting your spending decisions?
Very good. Thank you. And do we have questions in the queue yet?
We do. We're going to start off by addressing the economic questions, then we'll move on.
Before you do that, Melissa, I want to give Kyla a minute just to introduce herself and say hi. And that way we have time to get more questions in and we can go right to them. Kyla, you're on.
Yeah, it's pronounced Kyla, by the way.
Kyla.
Yeah, no, it happens a lot. So, but it's really great to be here with everybody. Your introduction already covered most of it, so I don't think I can add too much. I did write a book called In This Economy, which came out last year, which is an introductory guide to economics, talks about the Federal Reserve, talks about inflation, talks about the labor market. And yeah, I post primarily on social media, run a Substack, used to work with Bloomberg Opinion, do some writing for the New York Times opinion section now, and really hope I can help answer any questions about the rather confusing economic times that we're in.
Very good. Well, thank you again for joining us. Kyla.
Yes.
All right, Melissa, what are the questions that are coming in?
Okay. Looks like the first one says, can the monthly jobs report be trusted? Can anything the administration says be trusted?
Yeah, it is a tough time for data validity. And so with the jobs report, Trump did fire the commissioner of the BLS last month because the jobs number was revised and it was bad, and he did not like, what the jobs numbers were looking like. And firing a commissioner of the BLS is never a good thing to do because that's supposed to be nonpartisan. It's a statistical agency. Like, their job is to collect data and then report on it. And so I think a lot of people are having concerns now that with this firing and then the appointment of EJ and Tony, who works with the Heritage Foundation, that there could be some manipulation of the data. We got a jobs report number that seemed relatively in line with expectations. There's a lot of economists that are out there validating this data. You know, they have their own forecasts. But I do think that as we see a continued partisan angle on agencies that are supposed to be independent, including the Federal Reserve, there's warrant in being a bit worried about the data validity. And so I think that, yeah, that's what most people would say at this point. We still have to see, like, the jobs reports could be in line with expectations. They could not be manipulated. It's just going to take time to see if that's actually something that happens.
You know, Kyla, in my time in Congress, and especially my time on the Ways and Means Committee, our committee works with professionals, well-educated, dedicated professionals that grind numbers, provide data. The data that we get is incredibly important in regard to formulating public policy. And through Republican administrations and Democratic administrations, the trust that we have placed in those professionals, nonpartisan professionals, has always been strong. And we're seeing this discrediting of these professionals, and it's harmful. It's harmful for us to be able to make decisions, and it erodes trust and confidence that the American people have. So that's something we really have to pay attention to, and something we have to make sure stops.
Yeah, I mean, I think my biggest point of concern right now is what's going on with the Fed, where I'm not sure if there's a question about it. So perhaps I'm front running things, but there's now a Trump appointee to the Federal Reserve Board. He's trying to continually fire Lisa Cook under the guise of mortgage fraud. Stephen Moran, who is now, has taken a leave of absence from his White House job, but is still technically in the White House and is also on the Fed, voted for a 50 basis points cut yesterday, whereas the rest of the committee was in line with 25 basis points. And that gives you a pretty good indication of what the Trump administration wants to see out of monetary policy, which is big cutting in the face of economic data that might not warrant cutting. As you said in your introduction, perhaps putting more upward pressure on inflation, creating an even more uncomfortable labor market. And so I think that there's a lot of concern over these agencies and these institutions that have been independent, that have been doing really good jobs at collecting data and trying to report on it the best that they can. And now that they are under attack, and it's concerning.
Melissa?
How can Congress lower the cost of everyday groceries?
Is that a better question for you? Yeah.
I'll start. I think we could start by getting rid of these tariffs. And, and I think that's actually a multi-part question. That this tariff war, I think, is a self-inflicted wound. We've created big problems for ourselves with what the president's done in regard to tariffs. If he doesn't like somebody, he increases the tariff. If he doesn't like something that somebody said, he increases the tariff. One day he's going to lower it. The next day he's going to raise it. The next day he's going to keep it where it is. So there's an incredible amount of uncertainty as to what the cost of products coming in to this country and going out of this country, because the tariff stuff works both ways. We're seeing that, in my district, we're seeing what's happened with Canada and California, Canada and the United States, the retaliatory stuff, and it's the same with other countries as well. And I said it's a two-part question, two-part answer. Because part of the problem is over the decades, Congress has relinquished tariff control to the chief administrator, to the chief executive, and that's wrong. This is a power that Congress should hold. We should be responsible for that, and we need to take that power back from the president of the United States and do our job in the Congress.
Yeah, I definitely agree that it's primarily the tariffs. So if you look at things that the United States cannot grow here, so like coffee and bananas, like there's no way that we can all of a sudden start growing that stuff. And like even if we did somehow like figure out lab grown coffee, it would take a long time to ramp up production. The tariffs are primarily, assumingly, being done in the name of bringing manufacturing back, also underneath the guise of fentanyl and immigration. But I think that when you look at the problems that the everyday American is facing, it is high grocery cost. And we can't grow some stuff here in the United States. And putting tariffs on things that we need and that people eat is a way to really cause your grocery bill to go up. So I think the tariffs have definitely been something that is creating a lot of pain for American families. And it's something that doesn't need to be happening, especially if it makes no sense for us to even try to grow it here because we don't have the right climate.
And you know, to your point, I saw a great example of this just the other day. A city in my district has a water treatment plant, and they have to, every 10, 12 years, they have to change the filters. And they're in the process of changing filters right now. It's a three-stage operation. And they're going to pay about $200,000 more for the filters because of tariffs. And when that happens, one of two things will happen. Either the residents within this city are going to see a rate increase, or services to constituents in that city will be decreased to make up that $200,000 difference. And a lot of folks say, well, just buy American, that wouldn't be a problem. Uh, and to your point, you can't just buy American. The filters are made in Hungary, and they're coming from Hungary to this particular place in our district. And when the facility was built, the company was owned by an American. It was an American company, and then they sold to a foreign entity. So it wasn't the city's fault. It's certainly not the ratepayers' fault. And if they are going to start building those filters in the United States of America, it's not going to be done overnight. It takes time.
Yeah, I did a video for a company called Dynamo on bikes. So cycling, if anybody out there is a cyclist, because I really wanted to investigate like how hard is it to make something in America. And so I did this whole report around how difficult it is for this bike company that does make their bikes in America. I went to their factory, I was on the ground floor, I got the weld, and they were like, it's really tough. Like even these parts like the aluminum and the titanium that they have to get from overseas because there isn't enough here in the United States anymore. It's really expensive now and it's threatening their, attempted to be made in the USA, assembled in the United States company that they have. And so I think that's the other hard part is that it's really putting a lot of pressure on companies that are trying to do the quote unquote right thing. They're trying to make stuff here in America, but because of the tariff situation and how quickly it ramped up, they're being completely choked out, and it's really unfortunate.
Well, bikes is a good example. I do a lot of work
Mhm.
in the bike space,
Oh,
and
nice.
the companies that actually make bicycles here, they still get a lot of their components from overseas, from
They have
countries,
to, yeah.
and absolutely, that's where they're made. And they're trying to build those components here, but again, it takes time. So I have legislation that gives bicycle manufacturers some space to continue to be able to get the components that are made overseas while they're ramping up their manufacturing here in the United States. It just takes time. You can't do what this administration, what this president is doing, and not expect those costs to be increased on the customers here, American customers.
Exactly, yeah.
Melissa,
How can rising inflation be slowed/stopped?
Do
you
you want
want
me
to
to
go?
answer that first?
Oh, sure.
Yeah. I mean, so normally, so the Federal Reserve, they're the monetary policy unit of the United States, the central bank. They're the ones in charge of managing price stability and maximum employment, right? I'm sure everybody's familiar. And they are the ones who, when inflation starts ticking up, they're in charge of maneuvering rates around to figure out what to do. So they actually cut rates yesterday because the labor market is weakening. However, inflation is still a pretty big problem. And so this is the really tough spot, is that the entity that's in charge of inflation is now having to look at the labor market and being like, well, that's really weakening. We're going to have to pay more attention to that than we have been to inflation. And so that's one part of it, is that the Federal Reserve ideally would hike rates in a high inflation environment to slow the economy down, slow spending down, and hopefully slow inflation down. That's the mechanism. The other mechanism is, of course, fiscal policy, so what the government does, and that kind of ties into what we were talking about with tariffs. Tarifflation is a big question mark. We don't know if it's just going to be a one-time price hike on the economy or if it's going to be a continued impact. That's one thing that the Fed addressed yesterday, is the uncertainty around the actual impacts that tariffs are going to have on rising prices. But if you did want to lower prices, you wouldn't make it more expensive to bring things into the United States. You would make it cheaper. You would propose different policies to make things less expensive for people to buy, and that's the other side of it. And so I think like we're kind of in a double whammy right now, where the monetary policy body, the Federal Reserve, can't really hike rates for many reasons, and then fiscal policy is not doing us any favors with rising prices.
I think it's also important to note that, going back to what you said earlier, the danger of trying to stack the deck or rig the deal at the Fed. They're professionals, and it's their job to monitor those things and not lower the rate just because the president wants to see the rates lowered, so there's a bunch of money dumped into the economy. We ran into that problem in the past, and that's why we have the situation we have right now. And to try and manipulate that from the outside is particularly dangerous. I also want to say that during COVID, we saw a big rise in inflation, and it's understandable for a number of reasons. One of which, the supply chain was hammered and was really tough to get the things that we needed to make things in America, and even to get the things from other countries, things manufactured in other countries here in order to respond to consumer demand, and those prices went up accordingly. Now, I think that the work that we did dealing with the pandemic and the economic side of the pandemic was pretty impressive. Matter of fact, we were the envy of every industrial country in the world. We came out of this thing a lot better than a lot of our allies and a lot of our competitors. And a lot of the work that we did that got us there has now been decimated. And I'll speak specifically of the Inflation Reduction Act because all of the renewable energy tax provisions in that bill that was my legislation, and it's a double whammy because without renewable energy, the gap between the energy that we have now and the energy that we need is going to be widened, and it's going to be there's going to be a huge increase in cost to consumers as a result of that. And it's really important, and I know that there's been criticism about a lot of the work we did, specifically the Inflation Reduction Act, about that causing inflation. And it's really important to note that the Inflation Reduction Act was paid for 100%. And by definition, for anyone who's taken an econ class, when you pay for it, it's not inflationary. So there's other pieces of the legislation that were part of different packages that did pump money into the economy, which you could argue had an upward push on inflation, but it kept us from going over the financial cliff. It kept people employed. It kept businesses open. It kept local government picking up the trash, patrolling the streets, and providing health care. So it was a pretty phenomenal package that really got us through some tough times. And as I said, better than our allies.
Somebody asked, who pays tariffs?
Kyla, you say it, and you're the economic expert, and our answer is the same. But go ahead.
Yeah, the company importing the goods pays the tariffs, not the country exporting the goods. That's a common misconception, is that if we put a tariff on China, that means that China is going to pay the tariff. That is not the case. It's the company bringing in that product from China. So, like Apple would pay a tariff on iPhones that they bring in. And so I think that's something that's been really tough for people to understand, is that companies pay the tariffs, and what companies usually do, and what we saw them do back when we had tariffs on washing machines in 2018, there's research papers on this, is that they pass the tariff cost along, right? Like their companies, their incentive is to make as much money as possible. That's just how it is. And you, the consumer, are going to bear the brunt of the cost of the tariffs. That's why so many economists were saying that the tariff policy was a very bad idea. Targeted tariffs are, a different story, but blanket tariffs like the ones that we have now on many of our allies, used as political weapons, are, really just harmful to the consumer at the end of the day.
I think it's really important what you said, and that is any additional cost that a company pays for products that they're going to turn around and resell is internalized and is passed on to the consumer. So if the price of eggs go up, your breakfast is going to cost more. If the price of if there's $200,000 added to the price of the filters for the water treatment plant, somebody's going to pay for it. Either if the city decides they're not going to pass it on to the ratepayer, they're going to have to find that money somewhere else. And that generally means they're going to reduce other services to the citizens of that city, or they're going to do a combination, cut services and increase rates. But what do they say? There's no free lunch. So the cost of those tariffs are going to be passed on. And you can talk to anybody who had stuff on back order. You can talk to anybody who bought a car from a foreign manufacturer. Some of the companies negotiated a little bit of that tariff. As a matter of fact, the Hungarian filter company on this water treatment plant, they negotiated a little bit, so they lowered it, but it was still $200,000 that they're going to have to pay. So the consumer pays the freight.
Yeah, I think the other thing I'll say is that, companies know that consumers have, like, it's been several brutal years. Pandemic level inflation was very tough. Consumers had a tough time recovering from that. And so companies are aware that they don't have a lot of wiggle room to pass these costs on. And I think they've been a bit hesitant to do so. But there's more and more reports that are signaling that, they're getting ready to pass these costs on, and margins are shrinking. And that does mean that prices are going to go up for consumers, most likely.
And when prices go up on a product, they're slower to come down. So if you're making widgets and you're getting them $5 a widget, and then a global pandemic hits, and all of a sudden you find out that consumers will pay $10 for that same widget, the likelihood is when things clear up, it's not going back to $5. May not stay at 10, but it's not going back to 5. Melissa?
Okay. Somebody asked, how are tariffs impacting the financial outlook for Americans?
I mean, I think people are still trying to figure out, like the poll that you all took at the beginning of this talk is a pretty good indicator of everybody trying to figure out what tariffs might mean. We are trying to figure out, like I said a bit earlier, what the impact on inflation is going to be. The Fed is, I think, assuming that it's going to be a one-time price hike, that the prices will adjust and kind of stay at that level, won't continue to go up. But as most people said, like they're somewhat changing their spending patterns because of tariffs. I think we're still waiting to see the actual impact of them. They're also still being reviewed in court. That's the other thing that's kind of weird about all of this, is that they might very much be illegal. And then, you know, the United States will have to repay all of the tariff money that it has collected. And so, like most things right now, we're pretty much in a wait and see sort of moment where it's clear for a lot of companies that tariff costs have gone up. You know, the bike company that I mentioned a bit earlier, some consumer goods have gone up quite a bit, like coffee prices, because there's just no way to absorb the huge tariff costs that we have on products like that. But again, yeah, it might all be just, I don't think it will be for, you know, reasons that we can talk about later. I don't think it'll be ruled illegal, but that's the other weird part about this as well.
Speaking of bicycles, last Saturday, excuse me, there were some folks who were riding bikes. I ride a bike too, so we were
Oh,
riding,
nice.
and there was a young man who just bought a brand new bike, and he had to buy a brand new bike because somebody ran over him while he was on his bike, ruined his bike, put him in the hospital. Um, the person who did it's in jail, and the young man is now out of the hospital. He's rehabilitated, and he's riding his bike again, which is a good thing. But the bike he had, somebody there said, "Well, what'd you pay for that?" He said, "I got it for $15,000." He said it was right before the tariffs, and the same bike today is $19,000.
Wow.
Just for as a idea of what kind of hit that is.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the bike industry has been hit pretty hard by it because like a lot of it is raw materials. Like you just can't get certain products in the United States, primarily because we kind of stopped making some of them. And
And
yeah,
people
the costs of those products are definitely going to go up.
people change their buying habits. You know, he bought this bike because he had to. It's not only does he ride it for recreational purposes, but it's a mode of transportation for him. It's his only vehicle, and I'm assuming there was some insurance
Mhm.
money there, but he didn't have a lot of choice. You know, he had to buy the bike, but other people are looking. That's a lot of money to spend for a bicycle, and so people
It's a
are
ton of
adjusting
money.
spending habits on these things. Yeah, Melissa.
Okay. You have done a lot of work helping people understand complicated economic topics. What are some of the issues that people find most eye-opening?
That's a good question for you.
Um, I mean, yeah. So I've been doing this specific job for 4 years, and obviously the economy has changed quite a bit over the past 4 years. I think the thing I get asked about the most is the Federal Reserve and kind of what they do. I feel like for a lot of people, they're this like shadowy figure, and no one quite knows the decisions that they make or why they make them. And that's something that I spend a lot of time explaining because I think it's important that people understand interest rates and they understand the mandate that the Fed has. So I get asked about that quite a bit. But I get asked a lot about just general economic uncertainty. So people will be like, why are prices rising so much? And why can't I afford a house? And, you know, why is entry level labor market so tight right now? So it's a lot of pretty general economic questions that I spend a lot of time working on and trying my best to answer. Yeah.
Okay, somebody asked, how are businesses and workers adapting to the quote unquote attention economy?
I think that so the attention economy is it's an idea about the role that social media plays in our lives. You know, the idea that our eyeballs are the most expensive commodity that we all have. People will pay a lot of money for your attention. And we've really seen the advertising market evolve because of that. So what I do, you know, post on social media is one part of my job. That's a pretty important place for advertisers to be. And so it's really shifted the advertisement market. It's really shifted how people consume their news. A lot of young people get their news primarily from TikTok, which has all sorts of implications for quality of news, and if that news is fact checked and how that can spread throughout the information environment. But I think businesses are very aware of the attention economy. It's why they get accounts on social media. It's why they make short form videos. And then I think for consumers, they're also very aware of short form video, of the role that their attention has, of targeted ads, of the way that they now are just bombarded with news nonstop. Um, it says, there's a book that I can't believe I'm forgetting the name of it. I wrote about it in my newsletter this morning, but essentially it was this idea, propaganda by this guy named Alul. I believe I'm saying his last name correctly, but he talks about the idea of flood the zone before Steve Bannon talked about flood the zone, how valuable people's attention are, and if you can sort of capture their every waking moment, you can really more or less control them. And so I think that's kind of the thing with the attention economy is that people's attention is being monetized. It's being taken from them. It's being used in a way that is primarily benefiting a lot of very big companies, and people don't really have a say in it. And right now, the administration, the Trump administration specifically, is really using attention to get in front of a lot of people and just sort of be always in the news and always be talking. And I think that has a big role of the attention economy too, is that it can be this thing primarily for advertising, but then also now it can be a thing primarily for politics.
Have you seen any indication that there's a way by which we can move away from that? Um, you know,
Uh,
people just aren't going to turn off their devices, and they're a lot of people are just captivated by this.
Yeah. No, I've been on a book tour for the past year, and I've been to over 20 college campuses, and I've been talking to young people about how they feel about the attention economy and how they feel about phones and how they feel about the news environment. And they're just not into it. Like, I think a lot of people are really sick of it. I think now with the continued consolidation of the media environment, which plays into the attention economy, the Paramount Skydance merger, Paramount now trying to buy Warner Brothers Discovery, Oracle, and A16Z being a part of an investor group bidding on TikTok. Like, it's just like, oh, okay, like these platforms are really designed perhaps around the views of people, of very wealthy people who might not have the best interest of the people trying to use the platform at heart. And so I'm not quite answering your question of whether or not we can shift away from it, but I do know people are tired of it. But just because people are tired of something doesn't mean that they're gonna stop. I mean, that's the other problem is that people just sometimes they just roll over, and that's really the worrying part about a lot of this is like not resisting the attention economy, not resisting some of the decisions that the Trump administration is making, and just letting them happen. So I hope that we can shift away from it. I think it would make the political environment a lot healthier. I think it'd make the media environment a lot healthier. I think that the platforms have a responsibility here. So for somebody like me, I'm a bit of a hypocrite because I make videos about the economy online. So I take part in the attention economy, but I try to teach and I don't try to rage bait and I don't try to scare people. And so I think you need more power to people like that if this is the algorithmic future that we all want to be in.
Thank you. Melissa?
Somebody asked, how is AI changing in the labor market, especially for young people?
Yeah. Uh, so there's a new research paper out of Stanford called Canaries in the Coal Mine that talks about the impact that AI is having on the entry level labor force. It is having an impact. We've been trying to figure out exactly what impact it's having. It's been a wash if it is having an impact or if it's not. But this research paper was kind of the line in the sand that yes, this is taking entry level roles, is taking easily automated roles, is taking, beginner roles in tech and finance. And so people who are trying to get their foot on the first rung of the career ladder they're not having that opportunity anymore. And so there's a lot of, corporations that have spent a lot of money trying to implement AI. And so they're going to do all that they can to make that AI work because they spent a lot of money on it. And I think that's where we are now with AI and the labor force, is that the lowest hanging fruit is the entry jobs, because those are the easiest to automate, like I said. But it's also the ones that are going to have the biggest impact on the future of the labor force. Like if we don't train up our young people, like what are we doing? We can't just leave them out to dry. And so that's that. If you're interested in learning more, I would definitely read that research paper. But there's a lot of implications that come with it.
And there's a lot of unknown, and we're basically just starting down that road. So things are going to change. Government has a role. There's got to be guardrails on this. There's got to be protection for people. But AI is in fact going to change our lives. And as other inventions that have in the past have changed our lives. And there's some different issues. There's not only will they displace workers, how is it going to change how things are done, but there's also very practical things. How are we going to meet the energy demands of the AI world? And that's something that policy workers have to work on. And I'll go back, I apologize, but I'll go back to what I said earlier in regard to renewable energy. We're not going to meet that. We're not going to close that energy gap by building new coal-fired plants or building huge hydro dams. It's going to be through renewable energy sources, and we have to be cognizant of that.
Yeah. No, AI is funny because it's there's a lot of money going into it. The whole stock market is that's the Magnificent Seven, so the top 7 countries in the S&P 500. They're basically all bets that AI is going to work. So there's a ton of money wrapped up into it, but it's a little bit different than the dot-com bubble because you have these gigantic data centers that are physical assets. It's not something like pets.com that could just disappear overnight. Like it's like if OpenAI doesn't work out, we have all these data centers that we have to figure out what to do with. And all of the electricity pressures, the costs, if you go Virginia, for example, the electricity costs there have totally skyrocketed. And that's likely going to happen to places all over the country. Meta is planning to build out a bunch more data centers. Amazon is going to build out a bunch more data centers. And so that's the other strange thing about the AI situation, is that you have this technology that is like, our goal is to replace people in the labor force. The CEO of Anthropic, one of the major labs, has like come out and been like, this is going to take literally everybody's job. And it's like, I feel like you shouldn't be saying that. But they do. But then you also have the data center aspect where it's causing people's electricity costs to go up. And so it's really a strange technology, and we better hope that it works in the way that is best for people and perhaps not best for these corporations.
Right. Alyssa?
Somebody asked, the cost of housing is unaffordable for the middle class. What are you going to do about this?
Well, there's a couple things that I can tell you about that in regard to what I'm doing, and there's a number of reasons why the cost of housing has gone up. But on the what I'm doing in the immediate, there's 3 things that I'm working on that will have some impact driving housing costs down. One is insurance costs. Now, insurance is a state issue, and the federal government doesn't have a lot to do with, has nothing to do with rates. We have very little to do with insurance. But what I've done is I've carved out a little niche in federal law that will help lower insurance prices to homeowners, to renters, to everyone who's affected by that. If you can't insure your home, you can't buy your home, you can't sell your home, costs, it impacts the cost of homes and the ability to live in the home. So I've got a provision of federal law that will provide resiliency grants in areas that are fire prone to provide the resiliency work to get the insurance companies to come back, sell insurance, and lower the price of insurance. And in that same piece of legislation, there's a provision, a tax credit provision for landowners to do fire prevention and resiliency work, so those areas are not fire hazards, which when fields and forests and oak woodlands burn, we have 80, 90, 100-mile-an-hour winds. You have fires not only in those remote areas, but you have fires in areas where there's homes, which really causes a problem. The second thing that I've done after our big fires in our district over the last few years, we lost so much housing stock that I did a carve out in the low-income housing tax credit law that provided for $100 million worth of low-income housing tax credits to build affordable housing in fire disaster areas. And in our district alone, we've had almost 2,000 new units of housing built. The number I was using was 1,800 until last week when I visited a new development up in Lakeport where they're doing 64 new units. So it's 1,864 units of housing in our district as a result of that legislation. And there's a couple of others that are coming online, so that number will continue to grow. And then my colleague, Jimmy Panetta from the Central Coast, and I have first-time home buyer tax credits, $15,000 for first-time home buyers, which will help people get into the market. So there's a lot of things that we need to be doing. We need to, and I'll tell you that the other, we already talked about one thing we could do, and that's deal with these tariffs, because there's a lot of tariff cost that goes into the price of new homes. And that needs to be dealt with, and that'll wind the price down a little bit as well. We saw it in, I think it was 2017, the first Trump administration, when he did the Chinese tariffs, right when we were trying to rebuild housing, and the price of nails literally went through the roof. And it's a small example of how much impact tariffs have on everything that impacts our life.
I'll weigh in quickly as well. I agree with all of those points, and it's very heartening to hear. So I just turned 28, and so I'm kind of in the age where it's like it's probably time to buy a house, right? And for me, it feels very out of reach, and so I'm kind of in the same boat as everybody else. Like it's extremely frustrating, and I think part of the reason that the U.S. has such a weird relationship with housing is because we treat it both as a speculative asset and a place to live. And so a lot of people will hold on to their house. They have golden handcuffs. They're like, my house is appreciated 3 times over the past like 3 years. Like, well, I can't sell now. It's just going to continue to go up. And I think that creates a lot of problems where a lot of people's wealth is tied up into their homes and they're not going to sell. And so you have the supply lock that happens where younger people can't enter the housing market. There's all sorts of like demographic issues with that too. It's tough to get into the housing market in a lot of big cities. And so the other part is supply. Like zoning laws are pretty tough. I did an interview with Wally Adeyemo, who was the former Deputy Secretary of the Treasury, on all the work that the U.S. Treasury back during the Biden administration was doing. And he was like, the number one headache that we have in this country is zoning laws, it's regulation. And that was his opinion. I think it's true, but I think it's like 95% of Los Angeles is zoned single family. So if you really want to build more housing, if you want prices to go down, you just have to follow the laws of supply and demand and build more. And going back to your points, like, part of that is the cost of building homes has gone up due to tariffs. It's expensive to find labor. The input costs are expensive. The land is expensive. And so I think it's just everywhere you turn with housing, it's a headache, but it's also a relationship with housing that's troubling too, where people expect it to continue to appreciate and it can't do that forever.
And the California legislature just passed some laws to reform a lot of the regulatory issues that are bumping up against houses. And so you're seeing people responding to it, but you're absolutely right. There are a number of things that impact this, and they all go into the equation.
Okay, we have time for one more. This one says, please do not leave the government open. You'll survive a little while without a salary. Why don't Dems other than Newsom fight fire with fire?
Well, that's the big topic right now. As I said when I started this, that I'm in Washington, D.C. right now. We have a vote tomorrow on the funding bill to keep the government open in the House. I don't know what the outcome will be of that vote. Just kind of reading the tea leaves, I think it's probably there's probably a likelihood that it will pass the House because the Republicans control the House, and the Republicans that are pushing back, saying that they're against funding it, are also the ones that I refer to as the cave early caucus. They're the ones that are the loudest and the proudest on these tough issues. They're on the floor screaming, "I'm not going to vote for this. I'll never vote for that." And then they're the first ones to cave. So I think it's passing the House is in their favor. Once it goes over to the Senate, it's a different situation. The Senate is controlled by the Republicans, but they have the 60 vote cloture rule in the Senate. So they need, I think, 7 Democratic senators to go along with whatever the Republicans want to do. I think the Senate is feeling a little bit gun shy, given what happened the last time we were in this situation. So there's going to be a lot of pushback to give the Republicans the votes they need to take it up for a final passage, unless they can get something from the Republicans. And it looks like they get something from the Republicans right now. The focus is health care. As I mentioned earlier, their big ugly bill kicked 15 million people off of health care. They've allowed the tax provisions on the Affordable Care Act to go away. So there's about 20 something million folks who will lose their access to the health care that they're buying. So there's a big push to make this the issue. I support that push. I think healthcare is really important, and I think we should do everything we can to force them to reinstate healthcare coverage for Americans. We need to have a healthy community, a healthy country, healthy Americans, and if we can leverage it to do that, that's certainly something that we should do. So that's kind of the playing field right now for what's out there. The concern that I have, and I trust a lot of my colleagues have, is you can't trust this administration. We made agreements with them before on funding bills, only to have them renege on the funding bill after it was passed. So the discussion earlier this week, somebody said, well, we should pass a law that requires them to abide by any funding agreement that we make. And well, that's what we had before, and they just ignored the law. So I don't think that cuts it. So I'm willing to go to the mat to make sure that the American people are taken care of. And this is the place where that fight takes place. So stand by. That's the last one.
It was.
Kyla, thank you very, very much. It was a pleasure to be with you for an hour, and I trust my constituents enjoyed it as much as I did. You're very knowledgeable. You have a way that you can present these facts and talk about very complicated issues and complex fiscal matters in a way that makes it easy for people to understand. And I'm just really glad that you were able to share your time and willing to share your time with us. And I thank you very, very much. And for everybody who's joined us, thank you. I hope you enjoyed Kyla, and I hope you enjoyed this Zoom town hall meeting tonight. I know that we're not in ordinary times. These are very, very difficult times. And every day we see more crazy. We're seeing now a president threatening to take away licensing for television shows if they say something bad, funny, or otherwise about him. We can't allow that to happen. We as Americans need to stand up. You have to stand up to a bully, or it's just going to continue to happen. And we need to make sure that we stand up to folks, stand up to this president, and make sure he knows we're not taking a knee for him. We're not giving up our right to free speech. We're not giving up our right to listen to other people's free speech. So hang in there. I'll be fighting it at this end, and I really appreciate all of the outpouring of support at home in the districts when folks are out raising these issues. We've had some success. We've reversed some things that they've been trying to do. We need to continue to work hand in glove. It's a partnership, and we will prevail. And it's in large part because of all the great folks out there who understand what's right and share the values that make us the great country that we are. So thank you very much. Kyla, thank you very much. Melissa, you did a great job doing the questions, monitoring all of this. Thank you. And to all the constituents on, thank you. I'll see you at a live town hall before too long, and I hope to see you this weekend at home in the district. So thanks so much.